It's April 2024. I'm in my 30s, and we are still having the same tired argument about having women-only leagues and tournaments for esports. So, let's talk about it. Splatoon is just one of many esports games, though it's certainly one of the niche ones compared to powerhouse juggernauts like Call of Duty, Fortnite, Valorant, Overwatch, League of Legends. Even with Nintendo's sphere of esports, Splatoon's been the baby cousin of Super Smash Bros. We've got a lot of scrappy energy, we're full of underdogs, we're full of people of diverse identities, and a game about map control via colorful ink has caught the hearts of a lot of marginalized people. A lot of us are women, non-binary people, gender fluid, LGBTQ, people of color. But this doesn't mean we can just rest easy from pervasive stereotypes within gaming. Before we get into this deeply, indulge me in a little walk down memory lane for a little Rose of Battle. I swear it has a purpose. Rose, hi, that's me, got into video games at a young age and didn't know many girls her age who played games. While it seems to have changed by this point in the present, in the 90s and very early 2000s, games were heavily marketed to young boys only, and the strict binary of toy aisles delineated video games as a boy activity. This greatly confused me as a child. Super Smash Bros. Melee, the sequel to Nintendo's first party fighting game, came out in 2001, and Rose spent the next several years playing it. By the time she was in high school and starting to learn about tournaments, she briefly considered the idea of entering tournaments at conventions. But whenever she saw pictures, she only ever saw crowds of men. So she figured she wasn't welcome, and at the very least, it didn't quell her anxiety. After all, she'd already dealt with a lot of problems of feeling like she always had to beat guys at any video game, or else they'd claim girls were bad at video games. Having to do that in a more public, competitive setting? No way. So she never entered a Super Smash Bros. Tournament, despite being told repeatedly that she was good enough to try. How many girls have been too afraid to enter a competitive esport because of how aggressively masculine it's been? Too many. Dapple Productions, a Splatoon tournament organization, announced their next date for the Girls Duo Cup, a Splatoon tournament for women, non-binary femmes, and gender-fluid folks. Basically, if you aren't a man and you feel comfortable playing in something called the Girls Duo Cup, then it's for you. But the Not Men's Duo Cup just doesn't sound as nice for whatever reason. The first Girls Duo Cup ran on February 8th, 2020 by Endgame TV. And yes, we are still having this conversation for the upcoming tournament on June 8th, 2024. Do I realistically think this video is going to stop people from going, but what about the men? No, I'm fully aware I'm beating a dead horse here. But that's okay. I'm not here to change the minds of people who are being pig-headed on purpose. I'm here to talk to you about why these spaces have been and will continue to be beneficial, and also about what we can do to increase inclusivity. But first, we have some history to get into about another sport that relies on one's mind rather than one's body. Chess is centuries old, and older versions of it, which inspired the game as we know it today, date back to even the 600s in India. Modern chess developed a lot in the 19th and 20th centuries, and its strategy and meta has changed a lot. Yes, chess has a metagame. However, it's been a space gatekept to men since its early days, the days of its modern development, and even today its organizations benefit men socially and materially more than for women. In 1884, the Sussex Chess Association held the first women's chess tournament, and then in 1897, the London's Ladies' Chess Club held the first international women's chess tournament. 3 decades later, in 1927, the Women's World Chess Championship was finally established, although not really taken seriously by men. It was always seen as a junior tournament, a cute hobby for girls that couldn't stand up to the powerful, serious men's side of the game, when really a lot of the women were essentially building organizations from scratch, without much help, and couldn't offer the same resources that men were taking for granted. Chess, a strategic game in which gender does not determine one's talents, is still met with gender essentialist comments today, such as a comment in 2015 from chess grandmaster Nigel Short claiming that men and women were hardwired differently. Yet chess feels segregated, and it actually was until 1986, when Grandmaster Susan Polgar qualified for the World Chess Championship and challenged them to remove men's from the official title. Until that point, women were formally excluded from these historic tournaments. But if men's only tournaments are harmful, then why are women only tournaments okay? Some might ask. The difference is in how one gender is seen as the default in this space, and the other is marginalized. Power structures can influence how you see yourself in the world. If someone tells you that you're not good at something for the large part of your formative years, you're probably going to grow up thinking you're not good at it. And it's particularly bad when you're learning something new. It's one reason why so many girls in school think they're not good at math. Stereotypes become self-affirming. When we make spaces that empower people who have grown up thinking they're not as good or feeling unwelcome, we're giving them the time and space to build their confidence, make human connections, and uplift one another. This is important for any scene to grow, but it's particularly important for any group that wants to promote opportunities for people who've traditionally been denied them. Boys grow up often socialized to be more competitive from a young age, whereas I definitely know from my own experience as a young girl, I was encouraged to get along and make nice with people. I wasn't praised for quick thinking or working hard at getting to the center of a tricky problem. I was praised for my kindness. So that was what I ended up spending my time developing. Women's leagues and tournaments help us have a space that's for us, where we don't have to worry about competing to be seen or heard. Jennifer Shahade, a two-time winner of the US Women's Championship and a board member of the World Chess Hall of Fame, once said, "People hear about women's tournaments, and they have this knee-jerk defensive reaction. They don't think it's good. But they don't realize that women usually play with men. They're usually playing all in one tournament, and these women's tournaments are special events organized to promote women in the game." Susan Polgar, another chess grandmaster, said, "The day may come that we may not need separate championships. That's the ultimate dream, but I think in order to get there, we need to change society, how they treat women in chess. Slowly, I think it's possible. But these kinds of changes don't happen overnight." Esports are far more common today than chess for younger demographics, but I bring up chess because I find it to be a good comparison. Both video games and chess have physical demands somewhat, like playing through hunger on long days, but they emphasize a lot of decision making, and in esports case, also reaction time is huge. But they're not like physical sports where a size difference or muscle mass could greatly influence results. And even then, that is a murky subject that's being used to gatekeep out a lot of trans women from women's sports. So then why are leagues and tournaments for women so important? Because it's not about the frankly debatable physical or mental differences. It's about community, acceptance, providing a safe space for people who have felt excluded from larger spaces because of their gender. The top esports teams today are almost all men. It was notable when Geguri became the first female player signed to an Overwatch League team, and she was the only female player then. This isn't because women are worse at the game, it's because women weren't signing up. Well, why weren't women signing up? I actually did a video about discrimination against women in Splatoon and gaming as a whole a few years ago that goes into this more in depth, and I recommend checking it out if you haven't done so already. To sum things up quickly, a lot of the competitive gaming spaces have been aggressive, hostile, and unwelcoming, and a lot of women get way more flack than men do when making mistakes. If you were learning something and getting belittled constantly, would you want to keep up with it? We know that men are not inherently better at Splatoon or any video game than women. So why do we see so many more men represented in these spaces? I'll give Splatoon credit. We have more diversity in competitive communities today in 2024 than any other esport I can think of. We're overall a very LGBTQ positive community, and we also have a lot of players who aren't all cis men, which is the norm for a lot of other games like Valorant or Call of Duty. There's an obvious reason why this is the only game I've felt a desire to play competitively. I don't feel nearly as much hostility here for being a woman. So why has this been such an issue in games as a whole? A lot of this comes down to a long history of women being made to feel unwelcome in gaming communities due to the marketing of video games, to the attitudes many boys and men fostered in making gaming a boys' club. While nearly half of people who play games are women, there's still a pushback against women being visibly female in these spaces. When women are harassed in a fast-paced team game like Valorant, for example, upon speaking in voice chat, it sends a message to also anyone else watching or listening that if you're a woman, you are not welcome here. As a result, a lot of women choose not to use voice communication while playing games and choose to hide their gender. In Splatoon, this is very easy to do when you're playing casually or queuing alone. After all, the only way to use voice comms in the game is to do so through the Nintendo Switch Online app, and I'm gonna be real, nobody is using that. However, once you start wanting to play competitively in tournaments, you realize early on how vital callouts are in quick, effective communication with your teammates. This allows you to share information on where your opponents are, set up pushes together. A large part of improving in competitive is improving your own communication skills. If you repeatedly see women get harassed for speaking through a mic in other games, it's not much of a leap for new female players to feel anxious about speaking up in this circumstance either. And while the competitive Splatoon community has been more welcoming than other fast-paced competitive games I've played, this doesn't mean it's immune from problems either. We have our own history of players of marginalized genders choosing to step away. Seriously, go watch that video I did years ago. It's still relevant today. One thing I've been struggling with personally in Splatoon lately is the mental part of it. I have anxiety and ADHD, which is something I'd like to go to in a future video, and it feels like it takes more discipline for me to stay focused on the game. Any amount of stress in a competitive setting, if you're not able to shake off those worries, can make you misplay both mechanically and through your decision making. One kind of stress I think a lot of men in these male-dominated spaces don't realize is the extreme amount of pressure a lot of women feel when they are clearly the minority. And this absolutely goes as well for trans women and people who are non-binary, and often with additional other complicated feelings. Even if no one outright tells you you're standing in for all people of your marginalized identity, that's what it feels like when you've grown up hearing all of these stereotypes. If I had gone on to play in a Smash tournament when I was younger, I wouldn't have been Rose of Battle representing herself. I would have been Rose of Battle representing all other women in competitive Smash Bros, because there were so few other examples then. To go back to chess for a moment, Lisa Lane was a competitive chess player in the 1960s, and one of the best for the time. If you've watched Queen's Gambit, you will have experienced at least a part of Lane's story, because it seems like the character is partially based on her. She loved chess more than anything else in her life. Despite men's tournaments paying 10 times more, despite the stress she was under from her own life and also being the representative for all women in the chess world, she loved the sport. Yet she still chose to retire in 1967 after becoming the women's national champion in 1959 at only 21 years old. In 2018, she told Sports Illustrated why she quit competitive chess. Someone would mention that she was a women's champion. Inevitably, a man would ask why there were separate women's tournaments in the first place. She'd explain the serious systemic imbalance, and he'd insist on challenging her. I felt it would be letting the idea of women's chess down if I said no. I felt like I was working all the time. The idea that I was defending my title every time I sat down to play was an unpleasant feeling, even though I wasn't really defending it. I just couldn't put the title of women's chess champion on the line every time I sat down to play. The women's title had become a strain that she couldn't escape. It was impossible to play without being conscious of the weight of her gender and legacy and place in the game. She was growing tired, and she didn't see a chance of financial or cultural change. She was ready to drop competition. So in 1967, she did. Not many girls play chess these days, and it's a problem that the US Chess Federation wants to change. When the Federation's Women's Committee began hosting a girls' room at national events, they made a space where female players could meet one another and realize they weren't alone. This committee's chair has said that the participation of girls in youth chess tournaments drops off significantly after the 3rd grade. The ones who stay get increasingly outnumbered by boys, and when they were drastically outnumbered, they felt intimidated. The goal is to make girls feel comfortable, to build a culture for them to enjoy chess intellectually, competitively, and socially. I think that's why we see so few women stick around in competitive esports for mixed gender but male-dominated competitive esports at the topmost level. How much pressure must have Gegri been holding onto, being repeatedly referred to as the only woman in the Overwatch League? And I count myself among that as well, because I kept cheering her on for being the only woman in the league. Even when we're well-meaning about it, it's a lot of pressure to put on someone. She had to prove herself to guys online who thought she couldn't be that good. Then she must have been cheating. I wouldn't want to stick around through that myself. It's a cycle, because even when we do get amazingly talented women, we drive them away. And if we drive them away, then other women won't want to get involved. The clear aim of a women-only tournament is to create an accepting culture where women aren't seen as the minority in this space, where women, both cis women and trans women, and non-binary femmes are the norm. While there are more women and non-binary people playing Splatoon today than there used to be, which is something I'm overjoyed about, esports culture is still very male-dominated, and that takes time and work to dismantle, partially through greater visibility and opportunities for women. By actively making spaces where women not only get competitive practice, but also get to make connections with other women, we set up more of these opportunities for female and femme players. And with more visibility of women, this in turn encourages other women to turn to esports. It's as much for the future of competitive Splatoon as it is for the people who are here now. There's actually a really interesting paper published in 2023 from a study that found novice female Smash players not only performed worse when matched against men, regardless of skill level, compared to when they were playing in an all-female setting, but they also self-reported their performance more negatively in situations when they were paired against men. The inspiration for this study was previous experiments done by others examining women's self-reported attitudes in various situations, such as one where women in STEM reported higher vigilance and a lower sense of belonging when exposed to videos of a gender-imbalanced conference, while men were unaffected. Research has confirmed that we humans categorize people and will perceive ratios of gender expression and appearance in both in-person settings, like an esports venue, or online, such as the voice chat for an online game. Kyle Nola, Mark Beeman, Paul Raber, and Alice Eagley wanted to test how a tournament's gender context impacted the experiences of first-time novice esports players. To test this, they ran both a women-only and a mixed-gender tournament to compare self-reported emotional performance and measured results in the tournaments. They wanted to see how women responded and played compared to the male players. 178 college students with no prior competitive experience in Super Smash Bros. Participated. All participants had played the game at least once in the last year, but didn't play more than once a week. So they were all casual players who had some experience with the game, but were considered novices or low level by a competitive standard. I'll note that the participants were all cisgender, and the researchers do write about how transgender and non-binary players have different life experiences, face additional forms of discrimination, and could experience different effects than cis men and cis women do. This study didn't go into those sorts of differences, but it is definitely something that should be studied in more depth. The participants played 2 one-hour sessions in small groups, first learning about Smash, watching a tournament's grand finals match with 2 male competitors, and they practiced. The second session consisted of a competitive tournament against other study members, and they played as many matches as possible in their allowed time, playing 1v1 3-stock matches. And finally, they answered questions for the researchers about how much pressure they felt, how important they felt it was to do well in the tournament, whether they focused on themselves or their opponent during the game, and their own opinion on how they measured up against the other competitors. This study found that the more experienced female players beat a less experienced female player 65% of the time, but this dropped to a whopping 9.5% when playing against a less experienced male competitor. When equally matched, women won 12.8% of the time against men, and less experienced women beat a more experienced man 9.3% of the time, compared to 34% of the time when the lesser experienced woman played against a more experienced female player and beat them. Their data also strongly supports the suspicion that women tend to underestimate their own skill when self-reporting. We see this in how women will often self-select out of job applications or promotions. Every day, I wish I had the confidence of a mediocre white man. In my own case, I took half of my life being interested in competitive gaming before ever really trying it for myself because I was scared. And a lot of that fear did come down to how scared I was being judged by my gender. Splatoon is the first and only esport I've been a part of, and the only reason I got into it is because I saw so many other women around. It gave me the confidence to put myself out there and risk sucking, because I definitely have my days where I suck, without it feeling like a representation of all women. However, there are a few things the study didn't confirm. That being greater anxiety felt by women before a tournament, or that women in the mixed gender tournament would report feeling greater pressure during the tournament. This surprised the researchers, and honestly surprises me too. But they point out that there is a limitation of their study, and I suspect it could be the explanation for this. They were testing novices who weren't pursuing competitive Smash, so it's possible whether they won or lost didn't matter much to the participants. I have another theory. Counter to the high anxiety I've felt around my gender and competitive esports, many of the women in this study reported feeling less focused on their opponents and less engaged in winning. I wonder if one coping mechanism in a culture of being told you're not good at something is to just disengage from competition in it. After all, if you're not trying hard to win, you can recover some of your ego by not being so disappointed in losing because you weren't trying. Both that response and my own anxious hyper-focus on how I'm perceived by my performance are counterintuitive to playing our best. I really do recommend reading the study in full because it's interesting, and I hope the study is replicated in the future. I'll link it in the description for you to read. The researchers concluded, the goal of women-only esports spaces is to recruit and grow skill rather than to segregate permanently. In theory, gender should not limit a competitor's mental and physical potential to perform in esports, but changeable social factors do impact players' access to the hobby in today's culture and climate. Thus, women-only training and tournament spaces may provide protection from the harassment, othering, and gender-based discrimination that currently defines the gaming world. I hope one day we no longer feel the need to have tournaments segregated away from men, but they've been shown to be a great way to get women more practice, experience, and a sense of belonging that'll help confidence if they choose to push their skills further. And there's no zero-sum game on Splatoon tournaments especially. Nearly all of our tournaments are grassroots. Many of them are online. Nintendo's even created a tournament manager in the Nintendo Switch Online app for Splatoon 3. It's never been a better time to host your own tourneys. If you're excluded from the Girls Duo Cup, there are so many others you can join or even host yourself. Do you have any idea how many tournaments run every month? Between Dapple Productions and Inkling Performance Labs, there are multiple weekly tournaments, a few different monthlies, and even some happening twice a month. And that's only 2 of the grassroots organizations. This scene has lots of other tournaments happening. And then we have one tournament that happens maybe a couple times a year that excludes men. I'm sorry, but when you're the majority in esports, you cannot reasonably complain about being excluded twice a year. We're allowed to have our own spaces, to play among our own people without being worried about comments about going to the kitchen or having a smaller brain or plenty of much meaner things I can't say on YouTube that I have actually been told over many years of my time in gaming. Before closing, I do want to note some of the discussions around the language for this tournament. It's called the Girls Duo Cup. The branding is pink. It's very much about women. The tournament organizers also welcome non-binary and gender-fluid Splatoon competitors. There's been confusion each time about who is included versus excluded from this, and their TLDR on this is, if you feel weird about playing in something called the Girls Duo Cup, then you probably don't want to play. If you're not a man and you want to play, then you're welcome. They admit this branding will appeal mostly to women and non-binary femmes. Well, if this is a tournament more for non-binary femmes, then is it really friendly to people who are non-binary? Well, actually, yes. Because when we use language that lumps all non-binary people in with women, it implies that non-binary people are women light. Or it lumps non-binary people into yet another binary of boy non-binary or girl non-binary. There will be non-binary people who don't feel included in the Girls Duo Cup language, and That's okay, because people can make more tournaments for other groups. This one is specifically for a more femme-leaning space, and making that distinction clear helps people ensure that they self-select into the space they're comfortable in. It's not like the TOs are in the Discord going, "Hello, ladies and only ladies!" And non-binary masculine people are absolutely encouraged to play. Again, so long as they self-select into that space. Non-binary is a huge umbrella, and it's going to have people with very different experiences and opinions. There are some non-binary and gender-fluid people who do feel like they can be a part of spaces with feminine language, and it will never be my place to say that they're not welcome here, so long as, and this is the vitally important part, we're not implying that all competitors in the Girls Duo Cup are women. It's actually a really difficult line to walk to get the language right, and it's something that we'll all continue learning about and improving on. This has actually been a discussion that's been taking place in many workspaces I've been in for women that have wanted to invite non-binary people, but not make it seen as they're being woman-light. In my experience, the best thing to do as an event organizer is to make your intentions clear. And the best thing to do as an attendee with complaints over the language is to respectfully bring those concerns to the people running this event and explain why you feel othered by their language. I've always felt the people running Girls Duo Cup care about everyone, especially people of marginalized genders. And isn't that why we're all here? So I hope I'll see you in June for the Girls Duo Cup, whether you're participating or watching. One way men can support us is to spread the word for spaces like these, respect our own private spaces, and cheer us on public streams. Y'all are the real ones, and we adore you. If you enjoyed this video, please continue checking out my other videos about Splatoon, and please also check out my Splatoon videos I do for fun, not just the serious topic videos about gender discrimination. A lot of us like to have lighthearted fun too. I stream on Twitch a few times a week, and I do upload to YouTube once a week. See you all next time, and remember to treat each other with kindness.